society, functioning is not merely encouraged, it is quietly enforced, not just by institutions or systems, but by the people closest to you, family, friends, those who claim concern. Everyone wants you to function according to their rhythm, their comfort, their timeline. Even love at times becomes conditional on performance. You are tolerated when you are stable, welcomed when you are productive, forgiven when you recover quickly. What is rarely accepted is prolonged variance. What is misunderstood is that dysfunction does not always mean disruption. To be unable to function in the expected way is not the same as wanting to cause trouble. Most people who struggle are not asking to break systems or burden others. They are asking for something far simpler, not to be rejected outright because their internal weather does not align with the day's forecast. The common solution offered is solitude. Step away, take time, be alone until you are better. It is framed as wisdom, as care, as maturity. And sometimes it is. Solitude, when chosen, can be restorative. It can quiet the noise, soften the edges, give the mind space to reorganize itself without scrutiny. There are days when stepping back is not avoidance but honesty. But solitude, when imposed, is something else entirely. It stops being space and becomes distance. It becomes loneliness, not because one is alone, but because one is removed. Because the moment functioning becomes inconsistent, presence is revoked, participation is postponed, belonging is deferred. Mental health is not linear. It is not a staircase. It is weather. Some days the sky is clear and cooperative, thought flows, energy is available, the world feels navigable. Other days there is haze, cognitive friction, a sense that every action costs more than it should. This fluctuation is not moral failure. It is not weakness. It is simply how some minds exist. Yet even a temporary cloud is treated as a permanent condition, as if the presence of haze means the sky itself can no longer be trusted. And so the instruction is always the same. Wait it out alone. Return only when you are fully clear again. What is rarely asked is whether a person should be confined to loneliness simply because clarity is intermittent. Whether life should be paused indefinitely because stability is not constant. From childhood, some people learn this lesson early. That being acceptable is tied to being manageable. That discomfort, especially mental discomfort, must be hidden, rushed, or corrected quickly. When instability appears, it is not met with curiosity but with urgency. Fix it, control it, contain it, and if that fails, remove yourself. For those who grow up seeing too much, too early, the mind adapts in unusual ways. Hypervigilance becomes normal. Intensity becomes default. Thought does not move in straight lines. It loops, dives, accelerates. These adaptations may be invisible when performance is high. They may even be rewarded. Until they are. Years are then spent trying to bring the mind under control. Retreats, practices, discipline, therapy, science, spirituality, every available framework is tried in good faith, and sometimes it works briefly. There are periods where everything aligns. The mind feels stable. Life feels solvable. The effort appears to have paid off. And then, without warning, the structure collapses. The crash is not dramatic in the cinematic sense. It is quieter, more devastating. The realization that the cycle has returned, that the mind has slipped its leash again, that all the insight, effort, and discipline did not prevent recurrence. This is where exhaustion truly sets in. Not from losing once, but from fighting the same battle repeatedly and being told each time that next time will be different. By the age of 30, repetition becomes evidence. 30 is not a symbolic milestone. It is a statistical one. Patterns have had time to prove themselves. The idea that things will stabilize on their own loses credibility. Hope does not disappear, but it becomes more cautious, more conditional. It is at this point that a hard conclusion begins to form, not out of bitterness, but out of arithmetic. When everything else collapses, what remains functional? Again and again, the answer is the same: money. Not as a symbol, not as validation, as structure. Money creates buffer. It creates distance. It allows choice where choice would otherwise be impossible. It buys time. It absorbs variance. It permits withdrawal without annihilation. When the mind cannot be forced into permanent order, life must be designed with shock absorbers. If there are periods of clarity, moments where the mind cooperates and life resembles normalcy, those moments can be lived fully. Work can be done. Relationships can be maintained. Meaning can be accessed. But when the crisis returns, as it often does, money becomes the difference between collapse and containment. This realization does not come easily, especially for those who spent years avoiding money out of fear, principle, or idealism. There is often a belief that distancing oneself from money is morally safer, cleaner, less corrupting. But avoidance has its own cost: prolonged vulnerability, dependence, exposure. If something colder, harder, or less idealistic emerges in the pursuit of financial security, so be it. That possibility is no longer more damaging than the consequences of avoidance. Being afraid of money for too long has already exacted its price. And there are others to look after, not just oneself, but brothers, people whose safety and stability are now intertwined with one's own. Stoicism without shelter collapses under pressure. Meaning without margin is easily extinguished. A person whose inner life fluctuates, whose capacity comes in waves, whose clarity cannot be guaranteed on demand, introduces uncertainty. And uncertainty, more than suffering itself, is what society struggles to tolerate. It prefers consistent mediocrity over intermittent depth, predictable output over uneven excellence, smooth surfaces over difficult interiors. Philosophically, this is not new. Ancient systems of thought were deeply uncomfortable with variability of mind. Even when compassion was preached, it was often conditional on progress, on movement toward stability, enlightenment, or cure. The unstable were expected either to heal or to withdraw. Rarely were they invited to remain. Modern society, despite its language of inclusion, follows the same logic. It medicalizes what it cannot integrate. It isolates what it cannot normalize. It offers help with one hand while quietly narrowing participation. Support is extended, but belonging is postponed. The tragedy is not that the world demands functioning. The tragedy is that it confuses functioning with worth. From a philosophical standpoint, the demand for constant coherence is a denial of human finitude. Minds are not machines. They are processes, fragile, adaptive, shaped by memory, trauma, biology, and chance. To demand uninterrupted stability is to demand something ahistorical and inhuman. Some minds are built for endurance, others for intensity. Some generate insight at the cost of equilibrium. Some carry too much too early and pay for it later. These are not failures of character. They are variations of existence. This is where Terry Davis belongs in the conversation, not as tragedy, not as myth, but as a boundary case. Davis was not undone by ignorance, laziness, or lack of discipline. He was undone by a mismatch between cognitive intensity and structural containment. His mind produced meaning faster than it could be stabilized. Without sufficient external anchors, economic, social, institutional, internal coherence collapsed into salience overload. Thoughts gained authority. Patterns became directives. The mind turned inward and mistook its own output for signal. This is not romantic madness. It is a known failure mode of high-intensity cognition operating without sufficient grounding. Davis was a systems programmer of rare depth. He built an entire operating system, largely alone from the ground up, not a sketch, not a conceptual experiment, a functioning, coherent system reflecting deep technical understanding and relentless focus. Very few people, even in elite technical circles, could replicate that work. At the same time, he lived with severe mental illness. Insight did not protect him. Mastery did not stabilize him. Discipline did not resolve the fracture. The same mind that enabled extraordinary creation also undermined his ability to remain anchored to the world. Over time, the cycle tightened until the work, the isolation, and the illness became inseparable. What matters here is proportion, not drama. If a mind of that caliber, capable of sustained originality and execution, could not overpower its own internal architecture, then intelligence alone is not a safeguard. Effort is not immunity. Insight does not guarantee stability. This is not a romantic comparison. There is no claim to genius here, only recognition of limits. If minds of extraordinary capacity can lose against their own internal architecture, it is reasonable that an average person will experience recurring breakdowns despite effort, insight, and experience. The mistake is pretending those limits do not exist. So the life that emerges from this understanding is not built around constant stability or permanent wellness. It is built around reliability, around designing systems where performance does not depend on ideal internal conditions, around accepting fluctuation and planning for it rather than denying it. This is not cynicism. It is not bitterness. It is not a rejection of meaning. It is adjustment, strategy, the clarity that comes after years of trial and error. In a world that does not pause for fragility, money is not everything, but it is the one thing that consistently works, and that truth, once seen clearly, does not leave easily. This is not surrender, it is design. The world may continue to prefer function over humanity, consistency over depth. Loved ones may still struggle to understand fluctuation. Systems may never adapt fully, but within these constraints, one can still act deliberately. Not loudly, not heroically, but effectively. There is no promise here of permanent resolution, no belief that the weather will stop changing. Some days will be clear, some days will be hazy. That does not mean one must lock oneself away forever just because clouds pass overhead. The task is not to eliminate the weather. The task is to build a shelter that does not collapse when it changes. There is no sentimental hope offered here, only something sturdier, acceptance without resignation, resolve without illusion. An adult understanding that life is not about becoming permanently well, but about remaining intact across cycles of clarity and haze. Quietly, unromantically, that is what survival looks like.